Happy spooky season.
Happy spooky season.
My name is Jess,
My name is Hannah.
and today we are doing our very first author interview. Yay! Yeah, today we have the author of Dark Archives, a librarian's investigation into the science and history of books bound in human skin. So this book is about anthropodermic bibliopegy, which is fancy Latin for books bound in human flesh, which, as you can guess, is right up my alley. And so we are gonna get into it today. Would you like to introduce our very special guest?
I would love to. So today we have the absolute pleasure of speaking with Megan Rosenbloom, the author of Dark Archives, a librarian's investigation into the science and history of books bound in human skin, which is now being published in its fifth language. Fun fact. It's in English, Polish, Russian, French, and now Japanese. Megan Rosenbloom has a Bachelor's of Art in Journalism from Drexel University and a Master of Library and Information Science from the University of Pittsburgh. She is currently the Collection Strategies Librarian at UCLA in Los Angeles, California. Megan Rosenbloom is a team member of the Anthropodermic Book Project, a research team dedicated to the testing of anthropodermic books to determine their true origin. Megan comes to us with a wide array of experiences and can now add guest on the Badly Annotated Reader Society to the list. Please welcome author Megan Rosenbloom.
All right, so as we're getting into this, we have a little disclaimer. So as we know, I am a very morbidly curious person by nature. I collect teeth. I'm fascinated by very niche medical knowledge, and I annotated the heck out of Dark Archives. Hannah does not necessarily share this fascination. And so while she's read some of basically my highlight reel of my annotations, she's not read the whole thing. And so this episode is admittedly entirely for my own self-interest. One, getting to talk to an author of a book that I absolutely adore, and two, getting her on my side to get a non-morbid reader hyped about anthropodermic bibliopegy. So yeah, just start off, thank you again for agreeing to come on. This is something that I've been very excited about, and we're so amped to have you here. So thank you again.
Yeah, to be so clear, I'm also so amped, and she sent me like parts of it to read, and even just from the excerpts and things that I've read, I want a copy. And so I'm already like halfway there, and it's like very fascinating and very interesting. And your writing style as well, because I'm not a nonfiction reader either. I'm not. My BA is in English literature. Like, I don't do like all the nonfiction stuff, but your writing style specifically caught my attention, and I'm like, okay, I'm like super excited about this. And so now we'll talk about it now, and then I'm like excited to read it. I'll be going in search of a copy.
I'm glad that I don't have to do too much convincing, because I'll be honest, although I know you're looking for an ally here, I tend not to try to wheedle anyone into reading this book if that's why the title has the subtitle right there. Yeah. Librarian's investigation into the science and history of books bound in human skin. Because if you look at that
disclaimer
and say nope, then the book is not for you, and that's totally fine. But if you see it and you're curious and you're intrigued and you're not squeamish in the way that you just absolutely can't think about this, because a lot of people get instantly like, yeah, and if that's you, that's okay. The book does not have to be for everyone. I say it's extremely for some people, but it's not for everyone. There are times where people they reject the notion so fiercely that, you know, like I made it up or started it or something, you know? It's like I'm not saying this is an advocation of, like, I'm not advocating for doing this, It's not like, hey, let's all buy books in human skin. I'm talking about something that happened in history. And I feel like I take it in a from extremely respectful place. The book has funny bits in it because I think it's important to release the pressure valve, but the joke's always on me when that happens. It's never making fun of someone whose body was used in this way or any of that. Never, ever. But, I do ruin my kids in the tannery. And so that kind of thing does happen. I do make silly mistakes or goof things up in the research process because that happens. And so I use some of that to keep people on board, right? It's not, I think on the whole, and I'm really glad that readers got this because a lot of people didn't. But, on the whole, I think it's really deeply rooted in ethics and it's very respectful. And so if you are sort of on the fence on that level, like if you think, oh, it's going to be like, aren't these spooky ooky? It's not really like that. There are only a few bits, like the aforementioned tannery scene, that are gross. And so that's either people's least favorite or most favorite.
Yeah, 0 or 100.
Right, exactly. It's either, oh my god, that was so funny, and gross, or whatever, or I had to skip that part. No shade. Totally get it. But yeah, so I think, because there were readers, there were people who, like, my editor changed a couple times because of things at the house, and there were some people who just did not like the whole idea of the book. They was just like, no thanks. I was talking to a PhD candidate the other day who was trying to further the work in their own way, and they're having the hardest time convincing their university that this is worthwhile. And I'm like, or some people, the one guy that I quote in here who's really against the human skin books at Harvard and everything, he had said, these have no research value. I was like, I guess I'm just wasting years of my life on nothing then, because I'm a big idiot for no research value.
It's like, thanks, pal.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's such an odd, because to me...
I think I won him over, by the way. He has defended my book subsequently.
Oh, yeah.
That's good. That's good. But yeah, it's like, how could you... I don't know. I have some really niche interests being on the spectrum. And so, to me, like, it's hard to imagine anything not having research value.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Yeah, like, but if people are researching it, that kind of means that it has some value there, doesn't it?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and the reason why there hadn't been research around these, really, it's one of those things where... oh, why isn't there a deeper dive into these? And then some people say, that means you should do it. And then it's like, okay, and then you're the human skin book lady for the rest of your life. So there's that danger. Be willing to accept the mantle. If your special interest turns into a research journey, that turns into a book, that turns into you get called whenever someone makes a weird choice about a book, or your inbox is full of the craziest emails you could possibly imagine all the time. That was the side quest that became the main quest, right? That's like But yeah, to say it has not, for people to say it has no research value, I think it's just being they're just turned off by the concept.
Yeah.
Wholly, that they can't get past what it actually tells us. Yeah. Because if this was just look at these spooky things, that's not really a book. It could be like a picture book. Actually, some people did try to
It's the ghastly crumb tinies.
Some people did, can't we put pictures of the books all throughout the book? And I'm like, so you want a bunch of brown squares?
Yeah.
Like you want just pictures of brown squares. Is that going to excite everybody?
I liked how you did put the one image in of like the faintest one ever. I'm just finding it so Hannah can see too. So yeah, there is one image of a human skin book in here. And you can see that it's got this like centerpiece in here. It's got this beautiful detail work. That's at the very beginning. It's right beside your author's note.
Yeah, so I was like, that was my kind of compromise. I get that, of course, people would want to see what they look like. They look like every other book, and most books are plain. That one, it's highly decorated. It's got a skull. It's got gilt little cross knuckle bones and onyx and gold. Also, the colors, you can't tell in the paperback. I think it might have been, I can't remember if it was in color in the hardcover or not. It's this weird, like, sickly gray color. Yeah, it's like this. The color is a little unheimlich, like uncanny, because it's in. Weirdly, it says it's human skin in imitation of deer skin.
That's like, very specific.
What a choice.
Yeah, it is a choice. It's so funny when you get down these rabbit holes, the things that, the kinds of knowledge.
It's like, why imitate deer?
Yeah, the kind of reference points that people have. One of the ones in the Bibliothèque Nationale, there's a small grouping that I don't think are real human skin, but I'll never be able to test them, that are Bibles from like the 13th century, and the one has a bunch of notes in it about people believing it was human skin. And somebody said it is not human skin, like someone from hundreds of years ago. It is clearly the skin of a stillborn Irish calf. Duh. How would you not know that?
With all the confidence of a mediocre white man.
Yeah, of course. What kind of rube would you have to be to not know that it was the skin of a stillborn Irish calf?
Stillborn specific. That's so weird.
So bizarre.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
But yeah, that one has this weird color, but it is also ornamented in this way that makes it look spooky and whatever. And there's another one that I mentioned way later in the book that's in private hands. That's the Gold Bug by Edgar Allan Poe. That one has a lot of really cool ornamentation stuff on it, but most of the time they're really plain. Yeah. And they can be any different color or any kind of different texture too. So you can't look at one and be like, oh, that's a human skin book. But a lot of people, my email box is full of people who do think that. This book looks creepy. And if I had to do a rule of a little rhyming phrase, it'd be like, if it gives you the creeps, it's probably sheep. My little idea there, because sheep is actually one of the cheaper animals that people used in historic books. And a lot of times they were just not well tanned, so you'd see pores and like hair follicles and get stains on it and stuff like that. And so people are like, this one looks weird, and I could see little dots and stuff, and that's what they think they associate it with. But usually not.
Yeah, there were a lot of quotes in the book like that kind of were comments that other people had made or notes in the cover. There was one from page 21, and I admittedly know zero French, so I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of the name of this book, but it was De Destiny de l'Âme. Thank you. And it said, a book on the human soul merits that it be given human clothing. And that gave me the chills.
Yeah, that's the very infamous Harvard book, which has come up time and time again in a controversial fashion for Harvard, and they just keep accidentally poking the bear on that, I feel like. And so since my book came out after years, then someone at Harvard made the decision, even though the book was already off, it was even further off circulation than special collections. You had to get special permission to see the book. They removed the cover of the book. They ended up removing the cover. And not everyone, but a lot of us are like, why are you doing this? And now they're like, this is the respectful thing to do, and we're going to try to now do some research to find out, see if we could figure out who it was and maybe repatriate the skin to France. And I'm like, you can't like forcibly repatriate things, right? No. That's not how it works. People ask for things, and the likelihood of France, a country that has the strongest laws around human remains, just being like, yeah, we'll take it.
Yeah.
Also, why would you do that research after it's already been taken off? Like, why didn't you do it before? I have a lot of questions about how that went down. So they rightfully got some flack, right? The choices. And so that was when my human skin book lady bat phone started ringing again, and people started asking my opinion about it because they made this choice. And I think that it just further shows that this is not some esoteric topic that is just done and dusted. It's an active concept that people have to reckon with, because people are making choices to this very day and feeling very confident in the rightness from where they stand, making certain choices, and then turns out, hey, maybe there's a lot of people that don't agree with you now. There are also maybe a lot of people in the future that don't agree with what you did, and you do have to keep, when you are making changes to a historic object that are irreversible, is something that you have to take a great amount of responsibility for. So it gets blown over a bit since they've done this, but I don't know what the status is. I don't know if it's in the ground somewhere. I don't know if they cremated it. Which, by the way, if they did cremate a cover, would a 19th century French person find cremation a respectful burial? No, they would not. So I'm not saying that they did that. I don't think they did, but it just goes to show you that you can't assume things from your 21st century.
Yeah. Everyone's got a different idea of what respectful is.
Yeah, it is a highly contextual idea.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. I feel like the Harvard book is the one that most people have heard of, if they have heard of one. And I hadn't heard that they'd removed the cover. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and then it also, because of that news, because that happened, then some other institutions chose to re-engage with this idea, and there's a lot going on in human remains in museums and stuff, and so taking the temperature of what's going on now and people making choices. But one of them I was actually really happy about, because in Cleveland there is and this was in the news, but it didn't get the national splash that the Harvard book did, but it got some local press, so I don't feel like I'm blowing up at anybody's spot or anything. But there was a book in Cleveland that I didn't think we were ever going to be able to test, because they were not interested at the time when I first approached. And it was particularly controversial even for these, because it was a Quran. Which is like, whoa.
Yeah.
You end up with a whole lot of other issues around a holy book, and especially considering that I can't imagine this would be a respectful use of human remains within the Muslim tradition, right?
No.
And of course we don't know whose body it would be, but the fact that it was like allegedly a human skin Quran is a pretty big deal, and I could see why there's a lot of concern and hesitation around it. Big time. The Harvard thing happened, and then they were like, there was new leadership at this time, because it had been a long time, and they're like, we should find out. And I said, yeah, you should, because when you know, then you can make an informed choice about what the right thing to do is for this specific object. Yeah. That is different from Harvard, that is different from any of the other ones. Like, each book has its own context, right? You can have a general guideline, but you do need to take things from within their truth of what they are as an individual object. And they did the test, and they found out it wasn't real. So then, huge relief, right? But now they know. They don't have this thing on their shelf that they're like terrified of what to. They know. But if at the time they found out that it was real, that would be the point from which you could have community engagement about what the right thing to do is with the impacted community that it identifiably would have been relevant to. Yeah. So I'm not saying that every single book, like, that there aren't cases in which it would make sense to have an intervention with a book, but that is like case by case. But now they used science to find out the truth, and now that thing isn't a scary thing that they have to deal with anymore. So that's my advocacy, I think, is more for just like really finding out before you make any
rash decisions.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So another quote that we've got saved is from page 103, and you said, was the idea of binding in human skin so in line with the treatment of minorities that it made more sense than the general truth of these books' medical origins? And this one struck me because it's very in line with my own experiences of talking to people about these human skin books. And like when I first brought them up to my partner Jared, his first thought was that it was just another crime committed in the concentration camps of World War II. And so you can imagine my excitement when I go, actually, it was the doctors who were fucked up in this one, not the Nazis. But it tickled my brain that it was the doctors that were the biggest, like, culprits of creating these books. Yeah, I found that was really fascinating.
Yeah, I made a note on that one as well of the readiness for people to believe that human skin book binding is just another crime against minority groups speaks volumes about the self-awareness of the groups historically committing the crimes, but it also makes me wonder, like, how many other heinous things have been committed under the disguise of crimes against minorities. If doctors got away with this, who else was getting away with things because of that whole side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, so that's like the number one question I get is about Nazis. And I think the reason why, but this happened 50 years or so before that. And, the reason why is because I have a whole chapter about why people rightly make that association, even though it's not true. It's very understandable that they would, and that there was a lot of rumors about human skin lampshades and stuff like that, and I am not saying that it is not possible that people made things out of human skin in the Nazi camps, and there's one credible sort of lampshade that then went missing that was probably the real deal, but then we've tested an alleged human skin Nazi lampshade, and it wasn't even.
That lampshade was crazy, though.
Yeah, I wish I could show you what that thing looked like. It looked like a horror movie prop.
That was part of the book that I made Hannah read, because it's like, this is so nuts, and it's confirmed fake. So you're gonna have to be very brave for me and read this, because oh my god,
there was a weird style. Raw parchment looking lampshades. This was like a rustic style thing, and this thing wasn't even an animal. It turned out to be cellulose, so it was like plant-based.
That's so weird.
So I think it's basically like paper. It was like a shellacked paper, but it was in a Holocaust museum, in a small like Holocaust museum, and of course being treated with like fear and reverence and whatever, and then they were so relieved when they found out it wasn't real, understandably. But when this is the kind of thing that it's, again, so important to be able to do tests and find out the truth about stuff, doesn't mean that, it's not at all meaning that atrocities akin to this in some way didn't take place, because you can't say like something didn't happen at certain places. But it certainly wasn't a widespread kind of thing, especially when it came to books, as opposed to other objects and such. So I think that it's really important to be able to like that out. And in terms of other kinds of minorities, that's a question I get all the time too. And there's a very well documented dark history of the ways that, especially Black people in the U.S. were treated by the medical profession. Absolutely, and all that stuff is definitely true. But what we literally can't know the race of the people that these books were made out of. A weird caveat that I did not expect to happen was like the books that I've seen that said this is the skin of a insert racial group. When we test the ones of those that we were able to test were all not real. So what made someone write that down in that book is still the mystery, but it just so happens that is like 100% correlation thus far, that there hasn't been a single book that we've tested that has mentioned a race and been real. Were people intentionally deceiving? I don't know, because I think a lot of these the books like that we test mostly have some sort of note inside that tip it off, right?
Yeah.
You could just as easily have a book that had a lore associated with it and it didn't get written in there, and then the people who had the knowledge of that book being an alleged human skin book die, and then you don't have any. It's totally possible. But I tend to think that people who wrote notes in these books were trying to make note of something that they believed to be true, that they were told, and there was no way to really know that. Only one book, the Notre Dame book, that I think was like intentionally deceiving, fraudulent book. But yeah, I just think that it was people trying to do their best. And one of the things that, again, I was to find in that research was that your DNA, like, the test we do is a proteomics test. So it's really just testing a protein, the collagen in the skin, and saying it's from the, like, great ape family. That's, like, the most specific we can get. So we don't know biological sex. We don't know anything else about these people with a test that we can do that works well on tan leather. But even if we could DNA test these books, the thing that surprised me, because I'm not a scientist really, I'm a librarian, is that your DNA cannot tell you what race you are. And so everybody believes that is true, right? Have a DNA testing thing, and they say, oh, I have ancestors from this region or whatever. It's, yes, you may have ancestors at some point in branches of the family tree that are from certain areas. Race is like a social construct, not a biological one in humans. Mm-hmm. Race does exist in other animals, but it's really like how you are perceived in your culture, whether people associate you with a certain race or not. And it is not something that can be defined by looking at someone's DNA, even if we could extract it, and currently we cannot. There is no way to know the race of the people, and the skin, when tan, doesn't look like any specific race. And you could add colors to anything and whatever, so it's actually unknowable. Mm-hmm. So I would never be able to say no, racial minorities were used to make human skin books. I can't say that at all. But I will just say that it was always local corpses, for obvious reasons. Local to the area where they were made, invariably poor people, so marginalized in a different way, and we can't know the rest.
Yeah. Yeah. Another one of the quotes that sort of ties in that, it's honestly my favorite quote from the book, because it says, other ideas they cited, like the Hippocratic Oath, were not wholly appropriate in the context of the trial because the oath deals with the treatment of sick patients and not with the non-therapeutic experimentation on healthy prisoners. And that really summed up, in my opinion, like what was going on, especially with cases like, what was his name? William Corder. Because as soon as he died, because he was a criminal, his body was up for grabs, essentially, to any doctor that wanted a piece. And honestly, Corder's corpse was also my first time being introduced to public flaying, quickly followed up by the death masks. So those were both very niche info that I did not have before, but that was insane to talk about, like, post-mortem humiliation. Wow.
Yeah, so the Nuremberg trial thing, so this is basically the trials that happened after the Nazis were defeated. The doctor's trial in particular was this really long, protracted thing. It's honestly where our concept of medical consent originates. So that was in the late 40s, early 50s. So we did not have medical consent when these objects were being created. That was not a concept that people knew. But we feel so strongly about it today that it's really hard to imagine a time when that didn't exist. Mm-hmm. And so that's some of the people who come in and are like, we need to get rid of all human remains in museums that were not made with consent.
It's like, that's all of them.
Are we going to get rid of, all paintings that were not made with computers? That's not a thing.
Yeah.
It didn't exist back then. You can't hold things to a standard that literally didn't exist. How we talk about, contextualize things, you can absolutely contextualize them in the concept of these are things that, our idea of medical consent didn't exist at the time that these things were created, etc. There was no body donation. There was nothing like that. And like letting people know that's where these things come from, that is the job of the museum, of the library, of whatever, to contextualize things. But to say destroy things because it doesn't adhere to a standard that was non-existent in its creation, I think is really a step too far. By all means, treat things respectfully, give proper context, teach people about history and memorable objects, but don't try to hold it to a standard that literally didn't exist. And I was honestly really shocked about that it took so long for us to come up with this idea of medical consent. And it's just, you would think that people would have control over what's done to their bodies, but honestly it wasn't. It was just not a thing. And it took bred atrocities, this to get codified in any real kind of way.
I actually write medical consents as part of my job at work. And so, it blows people's minds to realize that informed consent is still a relatively new idea. Like, doctors used to be able to do whatever they wanted. And we basically had no repercussions. And like another quote that I pulled was just like, if under the pretext of total liberty we permit all those who consider themselves doctors to perform their duties, it would be authorizing impudent and ignorant people to be to be nothing more than unpunished murderers. That was on page 43, Canton from 1790. But that's exactly it, because there were no repercussions, and that they weren't really held to any sort of accountability until well after the fact.
Yeah, so that quote is from the French Revolution, and I found it really interesting because what this guy is saying, they were dismantling all of this old hierarchy. And they're like, except for doctors. Maybe it should be a little harder to be a doctor.
They might be able to use some rules.
Maybe they should actually have some required education before being able to act as a doctor. Like, maybe we should put some guardrails on only that.
Medicine is where we draw the line. We're not doing this here.
That's basically what he was arguing for. It's very interesting, that at this time where everything was being dismantled, they were like, let's shore up this a little bit, and that was the creation of what they call the Paris School of medical education, which then filtered out throughout all of Europe and the US and everything, which was basically, you need scientific education and you should be learning at the bedside of patients, multiple patients, and seeing different, and you should be opening corpses to learn how bodies work. And that was like, then had this downstream effect of a great increase in the need of corpses for study. Had a ton of huge impacts on that. And it was in the anatomical dissection that some of these doctors set aside some of the skin that would be made into books because they had access to it through this way. A lot of them were big book collectors, and they saw this as all that stuff. Once they were done, they just kind of threw bodies out, washed them down a drain, whatever, that kind of thing.
Willy-nilly.
So they didn't see it. They had this clinical distance, that clinical gaze. They didn't see it as, I'm desecrating a corpse. Because it was
just science.
And it was also like just like going in the trash anyway, kind of thing. And it's so hard for us to think of, to put ourselves in that mindset. That's a really hard thing, but that's what I try in the book. That's like I try to use as a way to explain how someone can get there. It was like a byproduct of this new, better way of doing medicine. You don't check that with ethics and humanity of this is a person, this is a person, this is a person. If you don't do that, then you can get so desensitized in this way that you don't see this as a big deal.
Yeah, the psychology of that is really fascinating. I've come across that in my own like studies and research and stuff, because the school that I went to is very much a research school, and so even in just doing like an English literature degree, they still would be so like conscious and honest about the ethics of like these works. You need to consider them in the context of the time that they were created. You can't look at them like, you can't put it in the context of today, and you have to understand culturally what was going on at the time and like why this was written the way it was and who the author was and their own experiences and how that shapes literature and how that shapes their work, whatever that work may be. And so it's interesting, like when I was reading through some of these quotes and stuff, like how, like I can understand that because I've obviously in a very different context, I've never studied human skin books before, but how that is so like fundamental to humanity is like, you have to remember that these are people, and this is something that you need to be conscious of, especially like someone doing like this kind of research into like, something historical like that. And I do agree that destroying things just because they don't hold up to today's standard is wrong, because what is that quote about those who forget history are doomed to repeat it? If you destroy those things, then it's who's to say that we're not going to like swing back that way and end up, and also just because it's not, doesn't hold up to today's standards, who knows what the standards are going to be 100 years from now. And it's important that we keep those objects to make sure that those standards don't go back, don't like regress.
Yeah, I really do believe that people would think that this was a hoax if they had gotten rid of these books because of their, a baby kitty.
There's
This
just
is Finn.
Finn. Oh my goodness. Is he being very vocal?
So cute.
He's our little co-host.
Cat co-hosts are always welcome.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think that if people would have gotten rid of the books before the test, only started in like 15. Okay, so it's like the test itself existed for a long time, but this application on cultural objects very new. And so if people had a concept of what this was, like if they're like, oh, this is a human skin book, this is messed up, I'm gonna bury it, I'm gonna cremate it, I'm gonna do whatever, like a lot of books that weren't actually human would have been destroyed for no actual reason. B, I think that people would have just assumed that these things were like a hoax, like a spooky fake thing, until it was actually proven that at least some of them are real. And then the question becomes, why did they exist, and let's figure this out, and not just wild goose chase of, it's not folklore, it's real, it really happened, and these are how it really happened. If you get rid of something before you have the ability to really dig into that, then you shut off that avenue of inquiry. Like we say, currently we can't know this thing because ancient DNA methods are improving all the time. And it's part of this really new field called biocodicology. And that's, again, the research value. This is where it's at, because it's like codicology is the study of a book and how it's put together, and how the like manufacture creation of a book tells you about practices of industry and animal husbandry and things like that throughout history. And you can learn about a book, about the manufacture of a book, by the extant object of the book. And biocodicology is interrogating these hundreds of years old perfect vessels of, to me, they are so perfect in the way that they keep history locked into a stable vessel, that you can then take a parchment book now. Parchment is not leather, so parchment is way easier. And take rubbings off of that book and find traces of all these different animals, like, and the scribe's lunch, and all sorts of wild things that it sounds like science fiction, right? But you're like, this is a really interesting area of inquiry that now exists, but they only exist because the physical object existed long enough for people to take these scientific methods and apply it to the objects that still exist. So that's why, yeah, you can't like know what future inquiries would be possible. And so if we've stewarded these objects for so long and kept them available for researchers to interrogate them in all different kinds of ways, with new ways of thinking, whatever, as a text, we can also interrogate them as an object.
Yeah. And also I feel like to destroy those things because of today's standards, that's like an erasure of that potential, which is tragic, sure. Quite frankly, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's really problematic, and it's also fascinating to watch people think that they're white knighting on behalf of some dead person. And in fact, they're keeping people from knowing what happened to them or didn't.
Yeah.
And me knowing the historical truth about the object is more important. Okay, so Quran example, right? Just because it's fake, that does not mean that I don't have a million more questions now. Okay, how did someone associate this with this practice? Who made that distinction? What was their motivation or not? And these may be questions that are unanswerable, may never be able to know. But the raising of those questions, I think, is important. And that's why I'm pretty gratified that the book has been taken up in a lot of classes as like required reading for libraries and museums, but also for other kinds of historical things, because I think people got what I was trying to do, which was great because I was not sure, because a lot of people at the beginning did not seem to get what I was trying to do. But the actual book itself, I think people really, once they read it, they understand. I offered up a lot of quotes and stuff from people who work with these, or librarians who are professionals in different ways, who have a pretty wide array of opinions about what should be done with these books or not, to show that it's still an active ethical conversation being had. There isn't an orthodoxy of opinion, about these, and for that reason, it's something good for students to engage with, to be able to be like, okay, given all of this information, where do I fall about what's my argument here about what should be done with this? What would I do if I encountered an ethically problematic object that at work? What would be my choice? I think that's a really important thing. And so often these days, especially with these like no bros and stuff, where they're like, well, just see if we can do this, without any sort of thought given to what might be the downstream unintended effects of this.
What are the byproducts of doing that? What are the side
consequences of my own actions?
Right. Yeah. And that's why I'm just like screaming on the hills about, this is my old man shaking fist at the clouds moment with generative AI. That's me. It's yes, I could see why you would want to try to see if you could do it. Mm-hmm. But the downstream effects are really extremely negative on a lot of fronts, and I will not use it.
Neither will I. I will never touch it. Especially because I'm a writer. I write a lot in my free time, fiction mainly. But I feel so strongly about it. And I'm like, I will not touch it. I'm not doing it under no circumstances. I promise myself. And that's probably going to get real difficult for me as things are going. But yeah.
No, you know what I think? My little secret, and I know I'm going to sound like very old, but I don't care. There are studies coming out now that show that using generative AI makes you dumber. It like shuts off your brain, and the more you use it, the worse it gets. So you and I, my friend, are going to be geniuses by attrition. We are going to rise to the heights of intellect in society because we refuse to do this. This is my game plan, honestly. I'm thinking that any age-related cognitive effects is going to be mitigated by the fact that I refuse to use AI, and then I will just be a genius.
Probably. And that's so sad to think of it that way, but for real. And especially I'm my background is in education as well. I'm on my way to becoming a teacher. So I've worked a lot in classrooms, and nowhere have I seen the effects faster than in classrooms with high school students now, especially in the BC school system. It is not looking bleak in there, which is part of why I want to become a teacher and teach literature and teach concepts like this. And it's really cool that Dark Archives is starting to become like required reading. As much as I'm not a very morbidly curious person by nature, I am extraordinarily open-minded. Like I had a friend actually recently tell me that I am unbothered to an unhinged level. Like I'm very just go with the flow, accept things as they are. And that's why I had some interest in reading this and speaking with you about this, because it's cool. Like I'm glad that we're still teaching stuff like this, and like we're still doing this research, and it's quite interesting. And it makes me a little sad that teaching high school, I can't make this required reading.
I've had people come up because I didn't get to do the book tour thing because of obvious reasons.
Yeah.
So when the paperback came out, I got to do 2 in-person events, but it was still pretty COVID-y out, and so it was like distance mask, just a few, it's a huge thing, and I was pretty nervous about doing it at all. But since then, you've been surprised that people still want to talk to me. They're still interested in, like, the topic has legs. And so I'll get invited to come speak at some university, whatever. And had this event at Rare Books LA. It's like a rare book fair, and they had talks. And there was like a signing line that was like down around the thing. I was so shocked. I was like, this is amazing. So it was cool to be able to get that little thing that you want as an author. You want to sit there and sign books and hear, because the book came out years ago, the people who are coming are people who actually had read it, right? Mm-hmm. Like when you're an author and the book comes out and you're signing it, people are getting their book signed with the hope that they'll like it, right?
Yeah.
And so there was one mom and daughter duo in the line, and the daughter, I'm trying to remember exactly, but the daughter had it as assigned reading in college, I think, and then told her mom, and then mom read it and then assigned it in a high school like AP class.
Oh my gosh.
Like, that is so cool.
I was like, you have high school kids reading my book? That is incredible. And for the more squeamish, I do feel bad if something is required and traumatizing. I hope it's not traumatizing, but then again, some of the things that traumatized me that I read as a kid, like Shirley Jackson reads the lottery and it ruins you for life. Like,
yeah.
Or another one that is a millennial signpost of a certain elder, I'm an elder millennial, but somewhere in that, of you are going to be a weird, spooky lady, is that green ribbon.
That is my favorite short story from a child. Oh my god. Can't wait to be a spooky old lady.
Yeah, so it's like that triggered something in a whole generation. And actually Carmen Machado, she did one of her stories in one of her books. She like took that story and changed it into something else, and I was like, oh wow, this is so specifically it for me, right? It's
so niche.
Just so niche. And so for anyone who's listening who's not familiar, I'm going to spoiler alert this story. It came out decades ago. Everyone always thinks it's in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which was another like foundational document for my generation, but it's not. It's in a different one. And it was the story of a girl and a boy, and the girl always wears this green ribbon around her neck, and the boy keeps asking her like to take it off, and she keeps saying no, and I think she says like when we get married or whatever, and then eventually they get married and she takes the ribbon off and her head falls off, and it's so shocking to a child.
I can just so vividly see that image as well of her laying in the bed
and then the head is
on the ground.
It's like, it is so iconic.
My gosh.
Yeah.
You know what's so crazy though? I've never read this, and when you say the green ribbon, I don't totally know what you're talking about. But then as you're describing that, my ma used to tell me that story as a bedtime story when I was a kid. I don't think I've ever actually read it.
Your ma's a weirdo.
My ma is a weirdo, yeah, but we love her. And that's so crazy though. I do know that story, but it was because my ma went out of her way to tell it to me as a child.
So I have 2 related stories about that I think are worth telling. The one is that, so there's this children's book author named John Klassen, I don't know if you're all familiar with him, but he is really awesome. And you have a kid, then you get to re-experience like literature through a kid's eyes and stuff. And he was doing a reading of his new book, and I brought my little baby goth with me to go see
Your
him
baby
read.
goth makes my day. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness.
She is. I swear I did not force her into being like.
She has such a big personality, and I love it.
She
I'm
does.
here.
She has a big
Oh my
personality.
goodness.
So when she was 2, she was like a frozen girl, and then one day she comes home from kindergarten and she's like, "I'm goth now, Mom," and I'm like, trying not to be too excited. It's like, oh really? Okay, I guess. And she's 8.5 now, and she has not relented on the goth front, and she's like the only goth kid at school. She dresses. She wears cat ears and like little black like shirts with cat skulls and things on them, and
She's got her own look.
yeah, it's a vibe. She just cultivated it, but I would say she's more like cute spooky. She actually is a fraidy cat, but she likes like Monster High and stuff like that. She just like that kind of spooky goth, like cute spooky goth. So I took her to see John Klassen because we enjoyed his books so much growing up, because they are weirdly dark, where like you realize, oh, the bear ate the rabbit who stole his hat. It's like an underlying kind of
like the original fairy tales before they got Disney-ified vibe. Yeah.
And yeah, he's really great. And he put out this book called The Skull, so of course we're like going to check him out. And we go to this little bookshop, and the kids who are at this reading are younger than my kid by a couple years mostly, but because my kid really likes John Klassen, I was like, let's go. So she was a little older than those kids, and they're sitting around, and he said, okay, before I read my book, I'm going to read this other book. And then he read the Green Ribbon story to them, and I was like, oh my god, this is happening, I just started freaking out. I was like, I can't believe this is happening, and my sirens are going off. And he reads the story, and I got to watch a group of children hear the story for the first time.
That's incredible.
It was like, I was like, wow, this is such great power. He's indoctrinating a whole new generation of children into spooky vibes, right? And he said, when my kid came up to get her book signed, he said, hey, I noticed you had a really big reaction. She's like, stuff like that. And because she has a big personality, she really showed a reaction when the girl's head fell off. And he's like, hey, so I noticed you had this really big reaction, so I was wondering, do you want my copy of the book? And she's, no. And I'm like, what? And I froze, and I couldn't think fast enough. I was like, are you sure? Are you sure you don't want it? And she said, no, I don't want it. And I was like, but I want I want the copy of the book that was also owned by John Klassen. Like, this association copy. And so I'm like really upset that I like fumbled it. I fumbled the moment. I was like, I want you to sign this copy of the Green Ribbon.
Yeah.
I whiffed it. I got really flustered and whiffed it. But I think the other part, way shorter, is that when I see memes about this story all the time, my algorithm is like really full of, my algorithm is really specific, I think. But it's like, I see these memes and then people riffing off of them and whatever, and then I keep thinking about when we talk about the context, the historical context, and understanding them, like, woe to the historians in the future trying to decode people's memes. Like, they're so
oh my
dense, and they could be reacting to things that happened in the news that were like a blip that you didn't really realize, and then they spin off into these other things. So I just feel like, do we ever get jokes, old jokes? Did we ever get that something was really funny if it's old? What are, for future historians, will they even be able to understand even a fraction of what we were talking about? And so I think about that all the time when I like court to understand the context of something that's old. There are certain broad stroke things that you can get, but do we really understand literally anything? I'm inclined to say no.
Yeah, I sometimes wonder if the people at that time, like working with these objects, creating these works, were to like look at what people are saying about it now and our interpretations of it now, like how hard would they laugh at us? Like, it's interesting. Also, like another thing in my literature endeavors, I'm mainly interested in 17th and 18th century literature. And so sometimes like I'll be reading something and I'll be in a class where like everyone's discussing it and everyone's like having these like lofty interpretations and whatever, and I'm just sitting there thinking this poet was for sure like just a guy getting high and writing poetry. I don't think it's that. Like, we have to remember that like people in history were still people with like jokes and vices, and it's not like everything was all like serious just because it's old.
Yeah.
And so now thinking about what we must look like to historians in the future is, oh my.
Yeah, and then sometimes when something transcends that because they're talking about an experience, like right now, my 8-year-old, she's a really advanced reader in terms of ability to read things that are difficult, but of course she's a kid, so she doesn't have a lot of context for things that are older. So it's an interesting balance because she can read stuff, but doesn't mean she should read everything that she can read. You know, things that I'm a librarian, so I'm pretty loose about what she's, you know, what I'm cool with her reading, and I want her to just find things on her own and stuff too. But when she mentions things to me, I've been hearing a lot about Little Women. And I was like, we were at the store like that day, and then she saw Anne of Green Gables, like the cover, and she's got a cool cover. I'm like, in the cart, we're doing it.
Encourage.
We're reading Little Women right now, and it's, yes, the language can be a little old, and it's honestly pretty didactic about being good. There's a lot of like
a lot of lessons put into the subtext of that.
But also the adolescence is so recognizable in a way that I was impressed, and I actually also really look forward to watching the movies with her because I think that she'll really dig it and stuff. Both the 90s one and the more recent one I think would resonate, but so cool to read with your kid and then have that experience of I definitely read it when I was younger, but I don't really remember. I remember them through the movies a lot, but I don't remember reading it. And then that sort of adolescent experience, maybe she hasn't had that adolescent experience yet, so maybe it's less impactful for her at her age. But me as an old lady sitting here reading it makes me all wistful and stuff, but I also know I read it as at the age where that was happening too. So it's
I
cool.
think my first time reading Little Women, I was actually about your daughter's age. I was probably around 9 years old. I remember reading it probably around 3 times between the ages of 9 to 12. And, like, it's still, even not having had those impacts yet, like, I still remember it. And actually, in the most recent episode we recorded before this, I actually referenced Little Women. And so I think it's still one of those books where it's, even if you haven't hit that age where it might be a common experience yet, it's one of those books that still just, like, sits with you.
Yeah, so I think it's okay if you don't have like a quick paper kind of thing, and if you don't really get Dickens or you don't get the reference, I don't think it takes away from it.
Not at all. No, it's a good one. Cool. Would we like to do a few questions?
Yeah, I had a question actually when you were earlier, excuse me, when you were talking earlier about how, like, the side quest becomes the main quest and suddenly you're the human skin book lady for the rest of your life, I was curious, just, like, from a writer's perspective, like, how... was that, like, a concern for you? Did you think about that of, like, how are people gonna receive this? And, like, do I really want this to be associated with me, like, forever and ever? Amen. Like, how was that, like, process for you? And, like, how did you, like... come to terms with that?
Yeah, I don't think I would have had the idea that it would be important. You know,
Okay.
so I come from a journalism background before I was a librarian. So when you're a journalist and I was at NPR in Philly, WHYY, and I would be out there, you're churning things out like multiple times a day. I would have 2 pieces on during the day, and I was still like a teenager when I was on NPR. It was crazy, but so I'm glad that like the tapes don't exist mostly, because I'm not saying I was good. I definitely didn't sound good because I was also trying to erase my Delco accent, which was it's a very specific accent in the US. It's the Philadelphia area accent. If you've seen Mayor of Easttown on HBO, that has the accent. But yeah, it's Kate Winslet tried with the accent. It's not easy to do. But it's not known as the most intelligent sounding accent in the world. I'll put it that way. But so yeah, my voice is terrible because they were trying to beat this accent out of me while training me to be on radio, and it was tough. But the process of doing that, even if it was a feature, you'd work all week on a feature that was like 5 or 6 minutes long, which is an eternity in public radio time. And then you would just move on to the next thing, right? So you're diving into these different areas of culture and surfacing them and then moving on. Doing something like this is totally different scale, right? It's a different thing. And once you do all that research and you synthesize it and you put it out in the world, then it's just out in the world forever. And technically your journalism is too, but whether you actually re-engage with something like that, it's not, I don't feel like it's that common. You do this, I did the research because I was interested in it and because I felt like one had done it. And and my interest comes from like a lot of different areas, but mostly I've always been interested in rare books and book history. But then I was also interested very much in the history of medicine, and particularly the way that bodies have been like used by the medical profession was something I was interested in. And this was the sort of confluence of all of those things, and felt like, oh, this is something unusual. And it had the currency hook of, and now we can test them and find out if they're real. So it wasn't just excavating something that was old. It would, because in journalism you have to have a hook, right? Like you have to have a thing that, why is this relevant to us at all today? Except, oh, isn't that cool and weird? The relevance level, that mark is the thing that turns something into a book that people can grab onto, as opposed to just, this is cool and neat old thing. Or at least that's what my agent told me. So that was like what we were trying to find when I was like trying to grapple, like, how do I make my way through this world? We had to grab onto a theme that was, how is this relevant? And it was that clinical gaze thing that finally locked it in for me, that I was able to take that and run with it. So yeah, I guess I didn't really think that, I guess on some level I would think I was the human skin book lady, but I also wasn't sure anyone would care at all. Many people's books, just you work for years, you release it into the world, and then it just, nobody picks it up. And I'm not saying it was like a huge success. It wasn't like some runaway bestseller kind of book, but it found its people, and the tail of interest is long, which is really a nice middle ground, I would say. So yeah, then how do you follow up the human skin book? Like, I'm not gonna, now that I know what it takes, now that I know what a book, researching a book, right, edit, like what it takes, then the bar is like way higher for your sophomore, I feel like. And that's why I'm actually working on a fiction thing.
Oh
my gosh, that was one of my
this
questions.
This was one of our next questions.
I asked you, I was like,
what's going to be to the human skin book?
Yeah, any hints for upcoming books? Do you think you might ever channel your research into some form of fiction, was what I was going to ask.
Yeah, it's funny. As a little kid, as my little spooky, I was like closet spooky. I wasn't like the goth stuff. And I became like a punk in high school, and I was way more punk a lot than goth. I just thought the music wasn't as good, I'll be honest. Always had gothish tendencies. Yeah, so I think there are a lot of parts about my growing up and different elements of things that I always found interesting that I just never had an outlet to put together. And as a little kid, I would win all these writing awards and stuff for my fiction. I wrote fiction as like a little kid and get these regional awards and things, and everyone said I was good at it. And then sometime in middle school, I was just like, I got this idea in my head that I would read something and then I felt like I sucked too much out of what I read, and then when I would write it, it would sound like I was aping like the author I just read to me. And
That's
I'd
my
be like,
biggest fear when writing.
Yeah, too much of a sponge, and I felt like I wasn't creative enough to really be like wholly original. And so I thought that I was like in 7th grade decided that I would be a hack if I was a fiction writer. Everyone would find me out. I can't do this.
Like the imposter syndrome was hitting. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just like immediately, with no one outside telling me that this was a problem, I decided it was a big problem, that I was going to accidentally plagiarize someone's style or something. And I decided to be a journalist at that point, and that was it. I just only wrote nonfiction from then. And looking back, I remember reading something online that just said that's a natural part of a fiction writer's development, is that you go through and you're reading a ton, reading things you like, you're trying out different like styles and whatever, and eventually you find your groove. But also, even if you think you're sounding too much like Irvin Welsh or something, like even if you think you're like sounding too much like them, you probably don't actually sound that much like them because you're not good enough to sound like them. So you're just like you're getting your inspiration, but it's going through the mill of you, right?
Yep.
And so I think I cut myself off at the knees there on the fiction front and just decided I wasn't creative enough or whatever. And also the idea that the fiction world is so wide open that you can choose thing to write about felt terrifying to me. Or in nonfiction, it's like you have to stick to the facts. If you say that door is red, it better sure be red.
Yeah.
Like, you can only add detail that you can find and corroborate, right?
Gives you structure.
Yeah, so that felt way more cozy to me, even though it's technically harder to do. And now that I've actually done it, and my agent was saying, have you written any, or have you thought about writing any fiction? I started thinking about some of the books I enjoyed the most over the past years, like the ones that we read in my book club and whatever. And so many of those just have these huge sections of nonfiction research in them, things that are real, that are incorporated into a fiction setting. And I was like, oh, I think I could actually do that. And it would be easier because I can do research like it's a journalism kind of book, but then make it hang more easily and comfortably because I can make things up. And that was
the light bulb moment.
Yeah, and it took an embarrassingly long time for me to get to it.
But you got there, and you said you're working on a fiction thing?
Yeah, it could take forever, so who knows, but I'm really actively working on it, at least on the like research tip. I've written maybe 3 chapters of not good yet stuff.
I call that my garbage draft. I'll literally, like, at the top of my first draft, I'll label it garbage draft as a way to give myself permission for it to be bad, because the first goal is to be done and then the goal is to be good.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm fine with, right now I'm just getting the plot on the paper for that stuff. Like, I need to see, and when I do that, certain things just happen and surprise me, and I'm like, oh, that's funny, that's good, that's whatever. But I'm setting it in pretty specific situations that I can research, either things that have actually happened in my life in my past or things that exist out in the world. So I know that's super vague, but there's one section of it where it's centered around my time in college at like a Philly punk kind of radio station time. And my 2 main characters like meet at this point. And then they meet again like 20 years later. And nice. My main character is like a book historian and doing research. So you're going along with her doing that, because that was something that people seem to really like. When people said they liked my voice or whatever in the book, that they liked going along with someone doing research because they don't do it themselves and always were curious what it was like. And so I thought, what if you were doing that with her, and that the things that she
is so cool.
encounters are real things, that So basically she's there doing one kind of research and keeps getting distracted by this other topic, and then it takes her on this like crazy journey or whatever. So I would say there's book nerd stuff, it's folk spooky.
Nice.
Can't wait.
Yeah, so it's not going to be scary, but there will be spooky vibes that are not terrifying.
Slightly macabre.
Yeah, like just kind of spooky stuff, things that I'm interested in, that I want to do research about, and also really highlighting the area of the Philadelphia, kind of Delaware County area, but also the Pine Barrens in New Jersey, which I think are such an interesting place in America that people don't know about. So I'm going back there in October. I've been going like a couple times a year to do research, see it in all the different seasons, do all the stuff, because there's a lot of woods stuff. The Jersey Devil is from the Pine Barrens. He'll be making his appearance in one way or another, kind of thing.
That's so exciting. We love our cryptids around here.
We do. We're very familiar with folklore around
I have
here.
a Mothman tattoo.
You have a
right
Mothman
there.
tattoo.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So the trip I'm going on this time is talk about the Jersey Devil all day, but it's in the fall. They have the cranberry harvests in the area.
Oh my god.
And it's really cool and weird situation where the cranberries grow in this area of the Pine Barrens. It's a weird ecological place where it's like pine trees, sandy soil, not a lot grows there except blueberries and cranberries and like carnivorous plants and things like that. It's a weird ecosystem. The water is like tea colored because it's got like cedar. It's like cedar bog.
Okay.
And there's 1 million acres of protected woods in the middle of South Jersey. Like just this huge swath of get lost and die woods in the middle.
Nothing like, spooky's going to happen there for sure.
Yeah, like between Philadelphia and New York, there's just this huge wilderness that's still really untouched. Amazing. When they harvest cranberries, they have them on these bushes and they like flood the plain, and then the cranberries float up, and then people are in waders and like scooping them off. So I'm hoping to catch the harvest at the right time, but this is about the right time, and I'll be staying on like a cranberry bog, like a cranberry farm for one weekend.
That's so cool.
And then one of the spooky things that happens that I'll include somehow, I just haven't figured out yet, is there are like really big crazy spiders that live in these woods, and when they flood the thing, the spiders climb on the tallest thing, which is you, the harvester of the cranberries, and some of them are like hand size.
Oh my god.
Spiders.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Fisher spider.
That's worse than all of the
so
human skin
cool.
books.
See, for me, okay, so maybe I am spooky. Oh, there's literally a spider on my ceiling now as I look up. Nice. I'm very fascinated by arachnids. And so, like, you're telling me about, like, hand-sized spiders, and I'm like, ooh, I want to go see them. Like,
yeah, so I'm, like, hoping to be able to see. I know I can't get in the bog or anything like that, but I'm hoping to, like, I have actually seen a cranberry harvest before. When I was a reporter, I went out and did that. That was, like, 25 years ago or something, that I went to see the cranberries getting harvested. And so I wanted... But obviously I wasn't thinking about that then, and I want that experience again and doing that. But then there's also this Jersey Devil Festival in Asbury Park the next weekend, so I'm going to both of those and doing research like in the week in between, going to different libraries and stuff for historical stuff.
Cool.
So, yeah, the last time I was there, it was incredible, and I don't know how much I want to bulge because I don't know how much is going to go in there, but because you like cryptids, I arranged this like private Jersey Devil tour in the Pine Barrens, and this tour group does these tours, but they only do it once a year around Halloween. And I was like, hey, can you like take all my money and take us out like off cycle do this? And they did a great job, but we're like out in the middle of the woods in this van and stuff, and the story is long. I won't get into all the rest of the amazingly funny, ridiculous things that happened, that we got stuck in the woods, that like all this stuff happened.
Oh my goodness.
But the best part was that the tour guide had arranged for this guy to meet us in the middle of the woods, and we didn't really know that, right? And so this person comes up and is telling us like, hey, I know you guys are here for the Jersey Devil, but I'm like sorry to tell you that it's just not real. It's just folklore. It's just a story, blah, blah, blah. And we're like, okay, we're all just standing around like,
Like,
all right.
alright.
And he's like, because when people think they see things in this woods, it's a Bigfoot. And then he talked about Bigfoot for 45 minutes. And we're all like,
Oh my gosh.
Had us in the first half, not gonna
just
lie.
mouth agape, listening. And he's like, here are some fins in my van. Like in his pickup truck, he had the like foot
my God.
impressions. Then I noticed, of course, he's wearing like a Bigfoot necklace. He's telling us all these things about doing his investigation, his Bigfoot investigations in the Pine Barrens, and like the juvenile calls and the blah blah blah, and he's doing all this, and we were just delighted beyond measure by the whole experience. And my friend who grew up in South Jersey was like, never in my life did I think someone would say to my face that the Jersey Devil doesn't exist because he's a Bigfoot.
It's a statement.
It was amazing. I was like, oh, how am I going to work this in? I'm definitely going to. And it's, I guess the long and short of the whole fiction thing is that I don't know if it's ever going to be good. I'm trying, like, I think I have some good ideas that
It'll be good.
kind of hang together.
You've got 2 readers at least.
So much fun with the whole journey of it. Like, I have playlists for my characters. I have all these, like, I'm doing all the things because this all feels like bonus time, where my one goal I had my whole life was to like publish a book that people could buy in the store and read, and I've done that like somehow.
Now this is for funsies.
Now this is totally just fun for me, and I'm dragging my friends on adventures into the woods, just doing like the most ridiculous things, and it's really fun. So I'm just having an absolute blast on the process. And I'm really okay if it doesn't become a real boy. But I do think it will, because I feel like, I don't know. I feel like I'll write something. Whether it gets published is another thing. But I'm just having so much rediscovering a childhood joy of writing fiction.
Heals the inner child.
Yeah, but it also feels really presumptuous to be like, oh yeah, I didn't write fiction for decades and then I just picked it up and published it. It's hard. That sounds insane to me too, because nonfiction is hard enough, but getting someone to notice something you're doing in fiction enough to publish it, that feels like a way higher bar to me. So I'm not counting on anything, but I am having a lot of fun.
But that comes through though in the writing. Like you can tell when an author really loves what they're doing. And also just like in the parts that I've read, your writing style is impeccable. It's great. And I will be picking up Dark Archives now that we've talked about it even further. But yeah, the reason why I wanted to ask you about that was because you know how everyone always says like in every really great lie, there's a kernel of truth. I think that totally applies to fiction writing in terms of people who are like highly educated and have done tons of research and are highly knowledgeable. That generates some of the best fiction I've ever read in my experience, just because there is that sort of vein of truth in it that just brings magic into things, that just takes something true and real and just makes it more like creates that like childlike wonder. And if you're having that experience while you're writing it, I feel like that really comes through, and like people are drawn to that, especially now more than ever with the rise of AI and all this stuff going on. So I think that's really cool and really exciting, and I'm glad to know that you're writing fiction. And I totally relate on all the insane research, because I'm currently down a Wendigo rabbit hole, because I'm writing, what I'm working on is like a series of like paranormal romance novels, but I wanted it to be like really grounded and really also respectful of the folklore and all of that. And so I'm also in a weird cryptid rabbit hole right now. So that's cool to hear about for sure.
Yeah. I think I've been reading really widely in genres and stuff that I normally wouldn't read or didn't before. And I've just been really gratified by the experience of digging into things. Like if I see anything remotely that I feel like this has a theme or a subject or something that would feed the book in some way, then I'm just listening to audiobooks like all the time when I have a pretty bummery LA commute. So that's like my alone time to listen to stuff. And I've been listening to so much. And yeah, reading things with a sort of critical eye of, oh, that worked really well, or I didn't like it when they went into this area, and helping you sort of find your middle ground of, I liked this kind of take, or when they went too far down this way, it like didn't vibe with me, that kind of thing. So I've been reading a lot of folklore based stuff, both real folklore but also fiction based on it. Or millennial midlife crisis books have been on the agenda, because that's definitely part of my character's arc. Anything that kind of fills in. But yeah, I think I started to say this earlier and got lost, but I realized a lot of the books that I've been reading in my book club, which are intentionally difficult books that benefits from having people together. And I have some pretty cool writers like in my book club, so people who really are really literary people, that it's like I realized that there was these books that I'm reading that have these huge chunks of nonfiction. That was the thing that made me realize, oh, I could probably do that, right? I could probably take those things and put them together. Like Rings of Saturn was one. Sabal grabbed me a lot. And there were just these, it's really just a guy taking a walk on the beach, but then he's thinking of all these different things and just going down these rabbit holes, and somehow that novel just hangs so well.
Reminds me of a man called Ova.
Yeah, Ova is so good.
There's a lot of books of let's go on a little walk and think things. Ulysses is that. Ulysses is one of my favorite books, and it's basically that. I'm trying to remember the other one we read. There's a Nigerian author in New York. I'm totally blanking, but it was basically let's take a walk around New York kind of thing. And I love that kind of stuff. Yeah, the fantasy thing. Normally, fantasy is not my bag, but I have read a couple things that I've dug, and one of them was I read because I was like working with her, Deborah Harkness, Discovery Witches series. So normally not my thing, but I really enjoyed her books, partially because she's a historian, early modern historian, and she included so many historical Easter eggs in those books. And you don't have to know that to enjoy it, but it was like there are still things where I'll encounter something out in the world. I was at the Getty Museum, and they had this Cabinet of Curiosities thing from Rudolph II, and I'm like, oh, he's a character in the book. They go to this place, and I wasn't familiar with him, but here's his actual Cabinet of Curiosities, and he was like a big collector in the book, and he had a crush on the main character and stuff. Because if you describe it like, oh, it's a witch who falls in love with a vampire, and then in the Bodleian Library in Oxford and all this stuff, it's like you could think about it a certain way, but then when you know that she actually has done research in those libraries, and she knows about these historical like personages, people, and you know that she includes these characters into the work, it actually, to me, it made it so much more fun, and I just really vibed with it on a history and book nerd level, and that was inspiring to me too, where I felt like, okay, you can take something and make it really fun and fantastical in a certain way, but ground it in real stuff. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people probably already know and do this, and that this is just a late blooming realization for me. But yeah, it's really fun to play with, because half of the book is like a nostalgia trip for me, and then half of it is more research based. And it could also, unfortunately or fortunately, it's either one book or three. I don't know yet.
Okay.
It hasn't been written yet. But
we'll see.
Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, so then is your research process for something like for Dark Archives, are you finding that is it different for like fiction, or are you like taking the same sort of research approach? Or because like Jess has a note here about a moment of appreciation for the 17 pages of sources and the index. Are you taking that like similar approach, or is it like a different sort of creative process, or like what is that? like?
Thank you for seeing my bibliography. It mattered a lot to me because,
Yeah.
like I said, if I said that door was red, I've got a source that says the door is red.
Oh, yeah. It was extensive and it was beautiful.
Yeah, I just, as a librarian, I took a lot of pride in making sure that everything was sourced. And certain editors would be like, "Can't you say this?" And I'm like, "Nope, can't."
And you know what? In making the notes for this episode, I actually did use the index. Oh my goodness, I loved it. Like, I used it to find quarter, I used it to find the Hippocratic Oath. Like, I want all nonfiction forever to have an index now.
Yeah, I did not do the indexing myself, but I was glad that they did do it.
Yeah.
A lot of times those things in the back, there were times I think where people were like, "Do we need to put these, can we just put them online?" No.
No, so much better in the book.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this, you know, to be, they need to be here. So, yeah, I guess in a certain way, I would say I'm approaching it. Yeah, part of it will be absolutely historical research. I'm getting a slower dive into that bit, but I'm starting to really do it now, where I've got my backpack full of stuff that I took out of the library on like Amish medicine and like folklore. And yeah, I happened to find some more like New Jersey folklore and stuff like that, where I'm taking notes out of books the same way I would do for or articles that I see, or but now I'm also like saving weird like memes that I find and things like that. There's a lot more. The world is broader by taking cultural like things in addition to written accounts and stuff. But I'm also approaching it in my like reporter way. So maybe like a narrative journalism kind of way, where when in Dark Archives and it wasn't always going to be this way. It took a couple drafts to get it where it was, where your like plucky librarian guide taking you through. I was a little resistant to that at first because I didn't want it to be about me. I didn't want people to be like, "Oh, who she thinks she is?" That kind of thing. Like there are drafts that exist where I'm not even in it really, or it's just stories, but they didn't hang together the same way as they did if you had someone bringing you along. And so in that sort of narrative journalism vein, I am doing a lot of that in service of the fiction. So for example, and I don't even know how much the Jersey Devil is going to be in this, but it is like an obvious area that I'm going to touch, so I've been learning about it. I was at a children's birthday party in Los Angeles, and I talked to some guy there for 5 minutes, and within 5 minutes, he was impromptu telling me his story of seeing the Jersey Devil when he was a teenager. And I was like, what? And then I was like, hey, can I get your number? And then can I take you? So I took him out for like Mexican food and recorded his story. And I asked him questions. And he told me the whole story of him seeing the Jersey Devil when he was a teen in South Jersey. And then he said I could use whatever I wanted from that. So I had previously written something that in the early part of the book that was like a couple lines, and then it fleshed out so much more, made it so much better to be able to add details that would be believable. And it wasn't a word for word kind of transcription, but like way more meaty that the reader would remember, because this one character who's telling the story has barely said anything, and then he like launches into this long divulging story where he's also opening up because he's telling the main character something that people might make fun of him for, right? So like that kind of thing is absolutely happening. Or me like physically going to places, like going to the Cranberry Bog, doing that, going on these tours in the Pine Barrens, staying at different times a year to feel like what it's like in the winter, what it's like in the spring, in the fall, and just kind of doing that sort of research. And then what I do, which I did not learn to do until halfway through Dark Archives, and luckily I don't think it's obvious, but I'm not taking notes anymore when I go and do something. I sit in my car or something and record everything I can remember about the experience I just had. So I'll just sit there and be like, so I walked through the door and then I saw and this thing happened and it smelled like this and I felt this, the air was stuffy and it was blah, blah, blah. And it made me think about this other thing. And I just talk.
It's a really interesting method. I like it.
And I just, now they have apps that just transcribe your speech too. So it does make it a lot easier. Although they're not great, you can read it over and then fix it. The anatomy lab scene, for instance, as soon as I got out of there, I sat in my car and just talked into my voice notes for every single thing I could think of. And I've been doing that. So anytime I have this an experience or whatever where I'm out in the field doing journalism, I will sit and talk it through. And then I'm also actually doing that for plot. So it was something I realized about myself. Everybody has their own methods, but the method that works for me, as you can probably tell, I'm quite a talker. So I am talking things out to think it out.
Verbal processing.
Yeah, so if I just start talking, things just start coming out, and then it's better than me just trying to think and write it, and then I can use that as the framework to write around. And that has been working for me. So I would say that's like my method in terms of the journalism kind of part. Like there's a punk venue, like a house basement venue that shows up in the story in the early 2000s era time. And I met up with my friend who's an artist and a punk musician who's still into action. I'm wearing a shirt with his art on it right now, Justin Dewar. He's in a bunch of great bands like Northern Liberties. And so I met up with Justin and got him a coffee, and I asked him all these questions about his house back in the day. Because I have memories of being there, but I wanted to hear from him living there, some of the details of things that happened and what was on the walls and what was the basement, these kind of things to try to jog my memory. So then when a character walks into the house to see the show, she can describe what she's seeing. So like that's how I'm approaching that part. But the historical research part is going to be more traditional, where I'm looking up articles and things. But I'm still trying to work out the way that you're like, by the way, I've never talked this much about what I'm working on. I cannot believe I'm saying but it's still so new. But my character is talking, you're looking through her eyes right now. Like, in general, I think it's going to be an internal, everything you think is through her inner monologue and through so I'm trying to decide exactly how I deal with her doing research in that way. Are you reading the things that she's reading? Like, obviously there are copyright issues to be too on the nose, but it could feel like that, where you're hearing stuff. She's reading about this thing, but then she's having intrusive thoughts about other things, and they're interrupting the flow. Like, I'm thinking it's probably going to be something like that. So the challenges of doing the research and finding these people or instances or things that she's grabbing onto, and then try to figure out how I'm going to weave that in without making it feel like you're just reading pages of academic articles. Yeah. Like, I feel like she's going to get distracted a lot. She's going to abandon things. She's going to, like, then go look at this thing instead. And so it should move fast and not be boring, but you'll be getting, like, facts while you do it or something.
That's great.
That's so cool. It's like a framing narrative kind of a thing, which is cool. Yeah. That's great.
That's what it is this week. We'll see.
It's a trust the process.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's unlike having this idea in my head that this will be this. It's gonna be a book that people buy on the shelves. That was my other thing. This is way more just every part of the process. I just want to be having fun and engaging with that, because it gives me this certain feeling that I don't get doing other kinds of work, this like joy, and I'm just grabbing onto that and having fun. It is more fun to travel or to, do things if you have a goal. For me, it's not, I just want to go here because I want to go here. It's, no, we're going to the cranberry bog. To me, maybe I'm the biggest dork on the planet, but it's fun to have a reason to go to a place and dig into something. So yeah, my little travel times have been crafted around that at the moment.
Awesome. That's cool.
Cute.
Yeah.
If you were to recommend a book that you referenced while writing Dark Archives, what would you suggest?
Oh, okay. Good question. The Harriet Washington book. Man, I'm going to have to look up the book because I don't want to get it wrong.
No worries.
Let me see. Okay. So I would say that Harriet Washington book, it's called Medical Apartheid. It's a dark history of medical experimentation on Black Americans from colonial times to the present. Like, truly, I tried to give context to the way, like, the racial implications of medical research, especially in America. But I really just wanted to say, read this book, read this book, read this book. And so I did, and I actually made a really specific active effort to call people out in text by name that I thought people should. If I took something where, like,
I noticed that a lot too.
Most people don't notice it, and again, some like editors wanted to like, oh, get rid of it because it's in the footnote. No, a lot of people don't ever look in the footnote, right? So I felt like it was very important to include people's names. There was a bit where I'm getting the gist of their whole book or the gist of their whole PhD dissertation is me rehashing that in a paragraph. Then I want to make sure that people know that they don't think that I think that I came up with that, or that they don't think I came up with that. That it wasn't, that it's important that you can then find it. And I remember seeing someone online say, oh, I just read this book because the Harriet Washington book, because it was referenced in Dark Archives. I was like, good, that is exactly what I wanted, because I am not an expert in that area. I'm pointing to the experts in that area, and if you're interested in this kind of thing, then this is who you should be grabbing onto. And to me, also, almost every single one of those people, except maybe one that I mentioned, they were women researchers. And so I wanted, to me, it was both ethical and like feminist praxis to be like, look at her, go look at her. So yeah, there are ways that I feel it came to me over time too, as I'm drafting, as whatever. I was like, someone should know about Ruth Richardson, someone should know about Harriet Washington. Like, maybe people who read my book wouldn't know these people, and they should. And so that was, or one of them was a PhD candidate, and I don't know that they've gone on to write anything else, but I definitely wanted to make sure that if my book was more accessible than somebody's PhD dissertation, that they were getting credit for that in a call out kind of way. I felt like that was important to do, and then it made me feel better about using their work. So yeah, like the way they do citations, commercial fiction, these are called blind notes. And so there'll just be a list of things in the back, and I think they might have had a little phrase or something from where I got it. I can't remember offhand. But a lot of times you just get a list, and there's a lot of things that it could correspond with almost anything. But that gets confusing if you're doing what you were doing and what I do when I read a book, where I'm like, where did they get that fact, though? That specific one. And then you have a list of 10 things that aren't associated with anything in the back. It could be a challenge. So I'm not going to have a bibliography in the fiction if it comes out. I'm not going to do that. But I'll keep it somewhere.
List of references.
For somebody or somewhere's reference, yeah.
And I feel like my character, because she's like a book historian, would probably be calling people out anyway. It would be something she would do in text.
It'd be on brand.
Yeah, so I feel we'll see how it shakes out, but I think that would be it's important to me. Yeah. So I appreciate you noticing it. Because yeah, most people don't.
Oh, we're all about the facts, the research, the like little nitty gritty niche things around here. That's definitely how we are. Get into
the granular.
Yeah, we do for sure. Yeah. We are that type of neurodivergent for sure.
Yeah, it's just things that drives me crazy about watching like movies and TV too.
It's not consistent.
Someone will use a phrase, and I'm like, there's no way they would put those words together in that time period. Absolutely not. It's not this egregious. Someone in like the French Revolution being like, we're cooked. It's like what it feels like to me. I just like cringe, like, oh, like there's no way they would have said that in that way.
Yeah.
But that's just my own nerd rage bait to bear.
Yeah. I have one final question. And in my own little dreams of having wanted to interview authors and talk to people whose work I enjoy, I always thought that I would always end off asking this question. And so I'm going to pose it to you. Is there anything you have always wanted to be asked or have always wanted to talk about with respect to Dark Archives or the process of writing that or anything, but haven't had the chance yet? And if so, please consider this an invitation.
Oh, that's such a good question, and I'm trying to think.
Yeah, take your time.
You already brought up the bibliography. That is something that I always wish people notice, and they don't. So that is one of them. I guess there's one thing. Researchers, like discoveries is something that I always find really interesting, and the reader is the thing that you find, that you found the hardest to find, that you found something and you're like, oh, I found this. This is amazing. I can't wait to include this. Is never the thing that anybody notices at all in your writing. People just like glance right over it.
Of course.
Because no one who isn't you can't understand why that was hard. And so I do have one of those. I will say with the major like caveat that when people say something was discovered in a library or archive, I did use the word discovery, but I don't like the way it's usually framed in the media. Like, the librarians and archivists had no idea that this thing was there. Yes, they do know it's there.
It's like, someone had to.
They know it's there, but it's not. What the researcher is actually doing is they saw something in a library or archive that was described by professionals, and they were able to bring a context to this thing that they might not have had as processing the material and as not experts in the thing that it represents. And so it's like a discovery from their perspective because they discovered a missing link or a piece or something. But it's not like they unearthed out of the trash or something. So that's my little soapbox about that, to say that one thing I was unable to find for almost the entire research process, and maybe it's just me, was like, how did the transactions go down of this, right? There's certain people who are in the process there's the doctor removing the skin, there's the leather tanner, who is a big question mark because that person is usually really marginalized in society kind of person, of who did they take the skin. The doctor and the rare book seller, binder, or whatever are relatively prominent artisans and professionals. And there's this leather tanner in the middle, and you don't know what that is. But and that guy's going to remain a mystery generally, for the most part. But, like, how did the transaction go down? What did it cost to do that? And how did this get arranged, basically? Like, how did this deal happen?
I actually thought that was one of I almost want to say most memorable chapters, because I found it very fascinating because you went into how, like, the process of tanning leather in that time is virtually unknown, and that it's very hard to figure that out. And so it's as soon as you went into, the guy in the middle that does the tanning, I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm so sorry. Yeah, like, immediately I'm like, oh, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I know, like, that it came across as this was the most difficult piece of information to find. And I feel like overall, like, you pulled in enough information so that as the reader, I'm like, I was able to understand the difficulty of the information that you found, but you still gave us enough that the process was understandable.
Yeah, so the thing I found that was my biggest win were these 3 books of Phyllis Wheatley poetry, and I had to dig to unearth why Phyllis Wheatley, a colonial era American black woman, first African American woman published in the United States, all this, like, why did someone find copies of her book in here? There was like a lot to dig out, and I was kind of flinching, like waiting to figure out why someone would do this. But it turned out the guy, Charles Hartman, was this big proponent of African American literature and was like trying to make a market for people. He was a white man, but was like, this work is important and people should be collecting it. And so he would bind copies of her book in like highly prized material, like Japanese vellum and stuff like that. Which, what does Japanese vellum have to do with her work? Nothing, but it was more like, this is something you should want to buy. And the human skin books seem to be within that like line of thinking, which again is weird for us to think about, but it wasn't some sort of punishing thing or something like that. It was, his ends seemed to be different. And so, but I was able to find, I want to say it was like University of Mississippi, I think, has Charles Hartman's archives. And I asked them if they had anything, I forget what exactly question I posed, but what they found was a receipt for a bookbinder, and it said 3 copies using leather supplied, and it had a cost on it. And I was like, oh, this is the thing. And so it's just showed, A, how much it cost, which was not very much money. Also, the euphemism that was used in order to do the transaction using leather supplied. Like, he's supplied. Yeah. So in that particular case, I don't know where they got the skin to make that book. It's almost always a doctor involved. But it was also very late in the time period. It was like 1930. So that's like really late. Is maybe the latest one I know about. Using leather supplied. So where did the skin come from? Blah, blah, blah. Might not know, but this was the finding that was like, this is the finding, right? And of course, that thing is such a blip that no one ever notices. Like, no one ever notices it. But to me, that was like such a win. We had found this thing. And because I had the context of the Wheatley books being human skin, etc., but if you looked at the object by itself, you would never put those things together, right? If you didn't have that context. So this librarian found me the thing that was the perfect thing for me because I was able to apply this extra context onto it. And I think those, like, it would be fun to me as like a writer, researcher, if someone compiled those kind of stories from people. Like, what was the thing you found in the archive or whatever that was your personal, like, eureka moment, even if that excitement or whatever didn't translate to the readers, that was, like, your process thing, your special, yeah, I think that's it. I know that might have been a lot of preamble for not that much excitement, but to me it was very exciting.
It's very exciting, and this is why I've always wanted to ask that question, because I feel like when you go into an interview, I would presume, no one's ever interviewed me, there's no reason to interview me, but when you go into an interview, I guess you don't really necessarily know exactly what's gonna come up, or you might have something that you yourself want to talk about. So I just wanted to open the floor to that before we sign off. So that was great.
I think it's a good question.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you again, Megan, for joining us today and for waking up early to talk to us and giving us a little bit of your time. We have been really excited and we are very grateful for you coming on today. And if you haven't read Dark Archives, honestly, just do it. Just do it. How have you listened to this whole episode and not ordered it yet? Go read it. It's available. I got mine on Amazon, but I'm sure there are many other places to find it. And so is there any last words?
No, thanks. It's fun to talk to, especially the annotators.
Oh yeah. It's extensive. Yeah. There's been a lot that went in. This is the first book in years that I broke the spine on. So, yeah, it's been beaten up a bit, but I love it to bits.
So fun.
Yeah. And if you would like to send us any messages on today's episode, have any thoughts on the book, on anything else, you can find us on Instagram or Threads at badlyannotatedpod, or you can email us at badlyannotatedpod@gmail.com. And all of our links are available in our Instagram bio. And with that, spookiest wishes, kind of scary regards.
Sincerely, Jess and Hannah.
And Megan.
Woo!